really need to, respond to what's happening now, be open enough, trust yourself enough, and not bringing the past into every day and every experience.
You don't hold onto the past only by the memories. What happens is that it's the behaviors that creep in, those learned behaviors of the past that kept you in survival mode.
Because the past isn't really alive now because of what happened then. It's alive because of what it's still triggering inside of you.
Time heals old wounds. And what I realized is that it's not time alone. It's time plus new decisions. Letting go isn't a loss. You don't lose anything by letting go. It's a gain, if anything. Hey, and welcome to Dating Dames V2. I'm Jacki, and this is my lovely co-host, Michele. Whether you're single, recently divorced, or simply waking up to the possibility of love once again, you're in the right place because, yeah, Dating Dames, we believe it's not about him, it's about you. And today we're talking about a topic of letting go of the past so that you can move forward into your life, into your dating life with momentum, with clarity, with a sense of self-trust and adventure. And here's a hard truth many women recognize is that you can feel calm, you can feel centered on your own, and still feel unsettled the moment you start dating. And that's not a weakness. That is not a weakness at all. It's just the past quietly creeping in and leading you, unless you decide to interrupt it.
So what we're hoping is that by the end of today's episode, you'll have a few really clear takeaways. First of all, we want to talk about what does letting go actually mean and provide kind of a practical understanding of that because, it's not that easy. Also, some insight into why the past still shows up. Maybe your relationship has been over a year, 5 years, 10 years, and yet you can see these things creeping up, reasserting themselves when you least likely to want it. And also 5 specific areas that when you really look to address them, they can change how you date, not just how you feel. So
Absolutely.
This isn't about revisiting, kind of what happened in the past, because I'm sure you've all done that. We've all done that many times. It's about freeing yourself, letting go to move forward intentionally.
Yes. So why is it that letting go isn't working for most women? And we've seen this. We've both experienced it. We've both spoken to women whereby, like you said, a year, 2 years, 5 years, 6, 7 years, people are still clinging on to the past. And I remember for me, I thought time. That's all you need is time because time heals old wounds. And what I realized is that it's not time alone. It's time plus new decisions, intentional decisions. And then I started thinking, well, if it's not time, perhaps if I replay every single situation in my head and I understood exactly what happened, especially after he uttered the words, I don't love you any longer, then I would get some closure. But those conversations, those insights, replaying the explanations of what happened, that didn't work either. Because what I realized is that you don't hold onto the past only by the memories. What happens is that it's the behaviors that creep in, those learned behaviors of the past that kept you in survival mode, whether it was bracing for disappointment, whether it was remaining silent in order to keep the peace. Well, that's not your intuition talking. That's just history repeating itself slowly again and again.
And I mean, definitely that whole idea of, oh, yes, if I can just repeat it, journal it, just spill it to 5 more friends, it's going to solve everything, or I'm going to get this closure. But it really doesn't work that way because very few people get closure.
Absolutely.
And also, if you've ever thought, I should be over this by now, whether it's 1 year or 5, I remember it was like a couple months after my husband requested the separation. And I was like, okay, it's been like 2 months. I'm fine. Now I'm going to go do, and I did this little psilocybin adventure with mushrooms. And because I thought, I'm healed now, 2 months in. But it just doesn't happen like that. Even 2 months is ridiculous. But
yes, absolutely.
Even a couple years is, or 5 years, whatever it takes, right?
Yes.
So I think, we've talked about this quite a lot. What is it that you need to do to really let go? And I think, one of the first things that we need to look at is what is still triggering you? What is still triggering us? It's not about what happened, because you can replay that whole scenario many, many times, but you have to look in, not at the event, not at the breakup or the betrayal or the actual ending, because the past isn't really alive now because of what happened then. It's alive because of what it's still triggering inside of you.
Yes.
And dating is the perfect place to see these triggers, these patterns come up again. And so whether it's, a delayed reply to your text, oh, what does that mean? Is he ignoring me? Is he distracted? That sort of thing. Or another situation that maybe feels, quite familiar. Oh, he's late or whatever. And therefore you're comfortable with that, but it's not what you need now. It's not what you're actually looking for. Or maybe they use sort of a neutral tone that you're thinking, oh, what does he really mean? And looking at these actual triggers, looking at your reaction, that's where the letting go begins.
So after you've been able to identify these triggers, and you don't identify them in isolation, it's impossible. When you stay in your little cocoon of life that everything is absolutely perfect because you've got total control, you don't experience any triggers. And then you move out into the world, and especially into the dating world, and it's reflected to you, and it arises. And so you've got the triggers that arise. And then there is the observing, but then replacing any learned behaviors of the past. And so, for example, you find yourself in a position whereby you are always over explaining things. You are always silencing things in order to keep the peace, not your peace, everybody else's peace. And then there is bracing for disappointment. And you find that these are learned behaviors of the past that kept you in survival mode. And now it's time to observe them and replace them with behaviors that actually serve you. And it doesn't mean it's easy, because you have to ask yourself the question, well, what does this behavior actually teach me? And does it benefit me or does it not? And am I holding on to something that I no longer need? So for example, with myself, I'm keeping the peace is probably one of the best things. Toward the end, the last few years of our relationship, I just started saying, okay, darling, it's fine. Don't worry about it. Without any understanding, really, because I just couldn't be bothered to go down that road of an argument, of more friction. So I would just quietly say, okay, no problem. It's fine. You're right. I'm wrong. And move on. That behavior you start seeing repeating itself. It starts creeping up once again in your dating situations. And it is now time to let go. Because when you start changing your behavior, the past slowly starts losing its grip on your current and present life.
So I think, one of the things that you were just saying was, this idea that you actually have to be in community or reflecting your behavior with someone else. And it often makes me think about, everyone wants to do their meditation, right? And we often think, well, if it's absolutely silent and I could do a 10-day retreat where nothing interferes, this is going to be perfect, right? But actually, and maybe for meditation to some extent it is, but you have to take that skill out into the world, deal with the traffic, deal with the rude cashier at the store, whatever it is, and you need to practice this and see how you react. And so to me, it feels kind of dating is sort of a similar thing. And I think part of that is because we really need to overcome this fear of repeating the past. And we think that if we can, kind of control our bubble, we won't need to, we can, that's how we'll heal, as you said. And that's how we're going to, kind of make it all right and everything will be perfect. But we don't heal in that environment. So I think a lot of women, and I get it, right? There's this whole sort of hypervigilance. I'm going to protect myself. Not going down that path again. I was hurt. I don't want to expose myself to those sorts of situations. I'm afraid of choosing the wrong kind of person again. Maybe I'll miss the sign, right? Maybe I just won't see that flag that was out there. And you're afraid, really, because you don't really trust yourself. But if you just protect yourself and you put the wall up, it'll feel safe-ish, but it's also quite constricting. You're trying to ensure it never happens again, but it keeps you completely disconnected from what's happening now. And I think that we really need to, respond to what's happening now, be open enough, trust yourself enough, and not bringing the past into every day and every experience.
Yes. I like that. Not bringing the past into everyday experience, not bringing the past into your present, right? And so then we need to, the fourth idea or concept we can look at is reducing and eventually stopping that mental replay. And geez,
I'm not sure I've stopped yet.
Stop, Michele. And it feels productive. You think you're doing something, you're replaying it mentally, you're writing it out, you're journaling it, you're sharing it with friends, and until you get the friend that says, stop.
They're kind of bored by now.
Bored by now. But also the danger of replaying it mentally is that you start adding your own little spices. So you could actually be replaying a version of the truth, which is not actually the absolute truth.
Well, and you're kind of trying to hold on to the anger, right? I mean, there's a side of us that the hurt, the betrayal, it's almost like, well, if I replay this, then I can feel that righteous indignation again, which is a little probably hit of dopamine, but kind of the wrong sort.
It is. Yes, it's the wrong way to get the hit of dopamine, right? Because you stay emotionally attached to something that doesn't exist in your present life. It's something, whilst we've been talking through this podcast in order to prepare for it, and something that really struck me was that A, you don't heal in isolation. B, we talk about these 5 great ideas that you could use to help move forward. So moving forward doesn't feel vague. Letting go of the past doesn't feel like a vague concept. But the other thing that also struck me was that you start learning that once you start coming out of this, what feels like hell at the time, you start learning that if you could do it then, you can can do it now. You are so much stronger. And I think a lot of women, we forget to just pat ourselves on the back and say, you did it. You know what? You did it. Nothing can take you down ever again. So this fear that you have is not an absolute real fear. It's recreated. And you keep expanding it every time you feed it, every time you replay it in your mind. And so that mental replay, yes, it feels productive. It feels like, but you're still attaching to the past. And actually, I thought that closure would come when I completely understood everything, but completion, it doesn't come from understanding everything. It comes from when that emotional charge starts fading, and things that really riled you up and angered you in the past when you thought about it doesn't have that same sort of power over you. And this is also part of the responsibility of yourself. Yeah. The more you accept self-responsibility, the co-creation of what you had created, the stronger you feel.
Well, and I think, I mean, to me, that's also, not to bring too many Buddhist principles into this, but the idea of acceptance, right? Things are going to happen in our lives that we are not going to understand, that are unfair, unwarranted, unasked for. And we're not going to understand why. And sometimes they're really quite horrible things. But looking for that answer, and even in the situation of maybe a divorce or a separation, probably the other person can't even understand and explain it. And so we really have to start building our tolerance, our acceptance, but there's going to be uncertainty in life. We cannot control everything. And we want to control it. We want to understand it. As you said, we think that if we understand it, it's all going to become clear, and then we're going to avoid repeating this problem again. But sometimes by holding on to that and replaying over and over, it's a familiar story.
Yes,
and we can look at it from every different angle and think that that's going to make the difference. We have to be willing to not understand why, to not get the closure, and you still need to move forward anyway. And as you just said, we have survived whatever just happened to us. And so we don't, take confidence in that, understand that, take it to the bank, whatever you need to do. You have survived it. You are stronger. You know what you need to do to move forward, and you just need to put it into action. And
absolutely.
Dating absolutely requires this skill, because you're not going to be certain about who you're going to meet. You're not going to be certain about how they're going to react to you, or even how you're going to react to them. You have to trust yourself, and you have to take the plunge.
Absolutely. And so how does all of these different steps, these 5 steps that we spoke about, how does it actually change the way you date? Well, once you start understanding what the concept of letting go of the past means, it doesn't feel that vague anymore. You know exactly what it means, how to do it. And dating then feels like a minefield, and it starts becoming your source of information, the mirror. And whether that mirror observation, whether it says things like, hey, Jackie, you need to observe this type of pattern because you've been repeating it, change it now. And dating gives you that opportunities. You get to ask yourself questions like, why does this still affect me? Why is this trigger arising repeatedly? And instead of asking that, you start asking questions like, is this a past trigger or a present issue? And you're able to then, you're almost better mentally equipped to deal with what's happening within yourself at the moment. Is it something from the past that's arisen, or is it something that's actually in my presence? Is this a fear, a genuine fear, or is it information? I like the idea of taking things to court. I think I heard this on the Jefferson Fisher podcast. When you are saying anything to yourself like, who will ever find me attractive? Am I enough? Take this to court. If you're able to provide evidence, different story. But most women can't, because it doesn't exist. This evidence doesn't exist. Or you can ask, in this situation, in this dating situation, am I reacting or am I responding? And one simple shift that changed everything was I stopped explaining, over-explaining, and I started observing. I had this attitude it's almost immediately when I started dating of, I'm going to start observing what happens here, but not just his behavior, my behavior more specifically. And
Might be
that's
the harder one to observe.
It is the hard one to observe. But that's when you start building self-trust. And you spoke about the bank, right? I call it building up the wins, stacking up the win. You can do it once. Okay, brilliant. If you can do it once, you can do it again. And this is really an opportunity for us to also say to ourselves, look at how far we've come. And it means we can keep moving forward if we have this concept of wanting to let go. But it is a choice.
It's an interesting point, the wanting to let go, because I think, just to pause on that a moment, I think we all say we want to let go. We don't want to be held back. But the actions we take, replaying, journaling it again, talking to our friends again, trying to diagnose, it's not the action that one would expect from someone who actually wanted to let go. And so, but it's as we've said, it's familiar, right? And we want closure and we want understanding. I think that will protect us. But just to recap, the 5 things that we were just suggesting are, first of all, identifying the triggers. what is still triggering you, not the story of what happened, but notice, and it could be coming from your relationship or it could be coming from the breakup of the relationship, but notice that. Start to observe and replace those behaviors that you're showing. I mean, just really notice, am I always overreacting to someone who turns
Mm,
up late? Why is
mm,
that?
mm.
How can I manage that? Well, and it might be a boundary, it might be a red flag, but it might just be you reacting to the past, and you need to overcome that fear of repeating the past and know that you have that ability, you have the confidence, you have done it before, and you can move forward, and that's how you're going to be stronger.
Absolutely.
For one of my favorites, reducing and stopping the mental replay,
Yes.
because I do this still 3 years in, doing it less. It's one of my New Year's resolutions.
Yeah.
Get rid of it because it's not helping. And
Mhm,
finally, just build up your tolerance for the uncertainty of
mhm.
what the date's going to bring, the uncertainty of any new
Yes.
relationship. Look at it as an adventure, as we like to
Yeah,
say, right? The
absolutely.
what is it? Something like a
Get
challenge
comfortable.
is just an adventure, poorly considered, and the reverse is also true. So consider it an adventure.
Mm.
Don't worry about the uncertainty. Just think, wow, what could happen, and it could be quite
Yes,
exciting.
absolutely. I think both of us have experienced that, whereby we've gone into dating experiences with an open mind, with an open heart, with a sense of adventure, and we have both been pleasantly surprised, and that is wonderful.
It's always an adventure. So an action step, maybe we should take, something quite specific,
Mhm.
is write this down. Not every feeling that you have belongs to the present, to you right now. Not every feeling
Yep.
belongs to right now. So maybe over the next few days, notice when your reaction is perhaps a little bit excessive for the situation.
Mm.
It's usually a sign that, your past or some other problem is speaking, not this particular moment. And often we know it's, the first step of any 12-step program is awareness of your problem. And sometimes that's all you need in this situation.
And if you're unsure of where to start, simply say no to something that drains you. Say yes to something that excites you, and say thank you to yourself for how far you've come. Because letting go isn't a loss. You don't lose anything by letting go. It's a gain, if anything. You're gaining control of yourself. You are gaining momentum in your life, and you start feeling at peace with yourself. And that type of contentment and self-trust is something worth working on, worth fighting for.
And will make all the difference in your dating life, right? I mean, that
Yeah.
kind of people read that sort of energy.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
So if you found something helpful in this episode, please share it with a woman, a friend, a family member who needs to hear it. You can follow us on IG and Facebook. And remember, lovely dames, it's not about him, it's about you.